All right, Reddit. Prepare yourselves because this story is a roller coaster. I'm Rick, 32, and I manage the community pool at my apartment complex. It's usually a pretty laid-back gig, checking chlorine levels, making sure the lifeguards are on their A game, and occasionally stopping someone from doing a drunken cannonball into the shallow end. But yesterday was anything but ordinary. That's when I crossed paths with Delilah, or, as the internet would later dub her, Karen. It was around 7 p.m., closing time, and I started blowing the whistle to signal everyone to wrap it up. Most people get it. Pool rules are pool rules. But there was this one kid, maybe 8 or 9 years old, still splashing around like he owned the place. I walked over and said, "Hey, buddy, pool's closing soon. Time to head out." He nodded, but before he could even climb out, a blood-curdling scream erupted from a nearby lounge chair. Entered Delilah. She stormed over, her face flushed crimson, screeching, "You can't close the pool yet. My son just got here and he wants to swim." I calmly explained that the pool closes at 7, and the rules are posted clearly for everyone to see. But she wasn't having it. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger inches from my face and hissed, "Do you even know who I am? I pay your salary." I tried to stay calm, replying, "Ma'am, I'm just following protocol. The pool closes at 7. That's when she completely lost it. She whipped out her phone, her voice dripping with venom, and declared, "I'm calling 911. This man is harassing my son and violating his rights." Seriously? Over a closed pool? While she was on the phone, I had this sinking feeling in my gut. I knew this woman was going to make my life a living nightmare. So I decided to cover my bases. I discreetly started recording her entire meltdown on my phone. I also called the non-emergency line to explain the situation, hoping to get ahead of whatever twisted story she was spinning. Minutes later, the cops arrived, sirens blaring like they were busting a drug ring, instead of responding to a poolside tantrum. Delilah, now with tears glistening in her eyes, fake ones, I'm sure, launched into her sob story about how I was discriminating against her son and ruining his summer. The officers, to their credit, seemed more annoyed than concerned. I guess pool drama is a common occurrence in their line of work. I calmly showed them the pool rules, the posted closing time, and the video of Delilah's meltdown. The cop I spoke with looked at her, then at me, then back at her, like he was watching a particularly bad tennis match. You could practically see the gears turning in his head. Then I mentioned that I had called the non-emergency line first. The officer spoke to her for about 5 minutes, trying to calm her down, but she wasn't having it. She was demanding my arrest, her voice rising to a shrill crescendo. The officers asked for her ID, which she reluctantly handed over. One of them took it back to the patrol car, while the other stayed with us. That's when I did something I probably shouldn't have. Driven by pure spite, I Googled her name. I figured I'd find her LinkedIn profile or something innocuous. Instead, I stumbled across a missing person report from a different state. And her real name? Karen Miller. The kid, meanwhile, was just standing there, looking confused and uncomfortable. He was probably wishing he'd stayed in the pool a few minutes longer. The cop returned, his face unreadable. He looked at Delilah, or rather, Karen, and said, "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." Things got really weird, really fast. As the officers escorted her to the squad car, she started screaming about how they were all in on it and how she was being framed. The kid, bless his heart, just stared at her with wide, scared eyes. Turns out, the missing person report I found was real. Karen Miller had been missing for over a year. She had a history of mental health issues and had apparently run away from her family. The cops ran the kid's name, and guess what? He wasn't her son. No connection whatsoever. They took them both down to the station, and after a couple of hours, I got a call from one of the detectives. He confirmed that the boy was a foster child who had only been living with Karen for about a week. She had somehow convinced the foster agency that she was Delilah, a stable and responsible woman looking to provide a loving home. The agency hadn't done a thorough background check. The detective also mentioned that Karen had been exhibiting increasingly erratic behavior in the past few days, and they suspected she was in the middle of a severe mental breakdown. The kid was now safe with Child Protective Services, and Karen was being held for psychiatric evaluation. I felt a strange mix of relief and horror. Relief that I wasn't dealing with just another entitled Karen, but horror at the situation itself. This poor kid was caught in the middle of a really messed up scenario. The local news picked up the story, of course. Karen meltdown at community pool leads to shocking discovery was a headline. My name wasn't mentioned, but the apartment complex was, so everyone knew it was me. My manager called to thank me for handling the situation calmly and professionally. She also offered me a few days off with pay, which I gladly accepted. But honestly, I felt terrible. I couldn't shake the image of that little boy's face. He looked so lost and scared. I found myself wondering what kind of trauma he'd already experienced and how much worse this whole situation was going to make it. I also felt guilty. At first, I had seen Karen as just another annoying, entitled woman trying to get her way. I hadn't considered that there might be something more going on. Maybe if I'd been more patient, more understanding, I could have de-escalated the situation before it spiraled out of control. But then I remembered her screaming, the 911 call, the lies. There was no reasoning with her. Still, the guilt lingered. The days following the incident were a whirlwind of emotions. The story blew up locally, and while my name was kept out of it, everyone in the complex knew it was me. My manager praised me for handling the situation with professionalism, but I couldn't shake the weight of what had happened. That little boy's face haunted me, his confusion, his fear. I kept replaying the scene in my head, wondering if I could have done something differently. The detective called me again a few days later with an update. Karen, real name Karen Miller, had been officially diagnosed with severe dissociative disorder. She was now in a psychiatric facility, receiving long-term treatment. The Delilah persona, it turned out, was something she had been developing for months. It wasn't just a random act. It was a full-blown alternate identity that had taken over. The detective also revealed something chilling. Karen had been planning to flee the state with a foster child. They suspected she wasn't planning to return him. My call to the non-emergency line and the video I took had been crucial in preventing what could have turned into a kidnapping. Hearing that sent a shiver down my spine. What if I hadn't recorded her? What if I hadn't called the cops? The thought of what might have happened to that boy was terrifying. But there was some good news, too. The little boy was now in a stable, loving foster home. He was receiving counseling and, according to the detective, was doing as well as could be expected given the circumstances. That was the one silver lining in this whole mess. Knowing he was safe and cared for helped ease some of the guilt I'd been carrying. Still, I couldn't just move on like nothing had happened. The experience had shaken me to my core. I started thinking about all the kids out there in similar situations. Kids in foster care who've experienced trauma, instability, and loss. I wanted to do something, anything, to help. So I reached out to a local organization that supports foster children and offered to volunteer. My volunteer work has been both heartbreaking and rewarding. I help with after-school tutoring, organize recreational activities, and sometimes just sit and listen when a kid needs to talk. It's been eye-opening to see the challenges these kids face, but it's also been incredibly fulfilling to know I'm making a difference, even in a small way. One little girl, Sarah, has become particularly special to me. She's quiet and reserved, but there's a bright spark in her eyes that reminds me so much of the boy from the pool. We bonded over a shared love of drawing, and it's been amazing to watch her confidence grow. Seeing her smile, knowing I played a part in that, has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. The whole Karen/Delilah situation still weighs on me sometimes. I've had some minor online harassment from people who think I overreacted or should have handled things differently, but I've learned to ignore them. I know I did the right thing, even if it was messy and complicated. I've also started therapy to help process everything. My therapist has been a huge help in sorting through the guilt and anxiety I've been feeling. She reminded me that I'm not responsible for Karen's actions or her mental state. I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And, as she pointed out, my quick thinking and actions likely protected that child from something much worse. This whole experience has changed me in ways I never expected. I'm more aware of the complexities of mental health and the challenges within the foster care system. I've learned to trust my gut and to act decisively, even when the situation feels overwhelming. Most importantly, I've realized the power of empathy and the importance of stepping up to help those who can't help themselves. So, Reddit, that's my story. Am I the A asterisk asterisk hole? I don't think so. But I'm definitely not the same person I was before all of this. I'm more aware, more empathetic, and more committed to making a positive difference in the lives of those around me. And as for Karen, I hope she gets the help she needs. As for the little boy, I hope he finds peace and happiness in his new home. And as for me, I'll keep showing up volunteering and doing what I can to make sure kids like him know they're not alone. Thanks for listening.